Today's postcard is from East Lancashire, a small town that has the descendants of Roger Bannister, had a lot to do with the Lancashire witches, and is a very sleepy town that is now reinventing itself. We're in Barrowford. We're on a witch hunt today, and where better to start but at the beginning of the Witches' Trail in Barrowford in Lancashire with local experts Sarah Lee and John Westwell. Now, we're starting our trail of the Lancashire Witches, which starts here in Barrowford and ends in Lancaster?
It does. It's a 45-mile trail. It actually follows the journey which the witches would have made from their villages in Pendle right up the Trough of Bowland to Lancaster Castle, where they met their very untimely end.
And why Barrowford as the beginning?
Barrowford is the beginning because the Heritage Centre starts to tell the story of the Pendle witches. And Park Hill, where the Heritage Centre is housed, is a building of that period which they would have known. And at Park Hill they've got a video on the Pendle witches and lots of information to get people on the trail.
Right. Now, name the villages that would have formed part of this spooky tale.
Right. There's many Pendleside villages that are nestling under Pendle Hill where the witches lived. There's Newchurch in Pendle, there's Barley, and Rough Lee, where Alice Nutter lived, who was the gentlewoman who was accused of being a witch. And she was the odd one out in the group, really. The rest were peasant people.
I just love the different coloured stones on this, John. You've got sandy gold, you've got rose pink stones here on this house. Where does it all come from?
Well, it's all quarried locally, and there are two main quarries in the village that were used. The pinky coloured stone comes from about a quarter of a mile away, and it was probably floated down the nearby river on a raft. The sandstone comes from the hillside just at the back of the house.
Would this house have known the Lancashire witches?
The family probably did, because one of their relatives, Nicholas Bannister, was involved in the trial of the initial questioning of the witches in 1612. So he was a sort of cousin several times removed, but he was related to the Bannisters that lived here.
Right.
And probably the story would have been current at that time.
The name Bannister keeps cropping up when we talk about this house and inside here, and there is a very famous descendant.
That's right. When the Bannisters left in 1750, the family moved to Trawden, and it was there that Sir Roger Bannister was born, the first man to run the 4-minute mile, of course. And he is a descendant of the Bannisters that lived at Park Hill, and he has been back on a number of occasions, most recently a couple of years ago. He's been involved with a number of openings. This room, for example, is known as the Bannister Room.
Oh, this actual room we're in.
He came here in 1983 when we'd completed a lot of renovation work to open the room.
And this now is what? Because there's no one living here, is there?
No, the farmhouse Park Hill was derelict in the early 1970s, and it was taken over in partnership with Pendle Council in 1977 to form Pendle Heritage Centre initially as a small local museum, and we've gradually expanded since then, and we're on the verge of doing some quite major works, hopefully with some lottery money that we've applied for, to both tell the story of this house better and also the story of the Pendle witches, and we're hoping to be working closely with Pendle Council on this venture.
And we look down on the village now. Anything we should be looking out for? I can see, is that just like a boating lake or something?
Well, it's now just a sort of ornamental pond in the park, but it was originally the reservoir or mill pond for the spinning mill which stood on the site until the 1930s. That was demolished in about 1933. And it was powered by water that was taken from the weir on the river just opposite where the house is at Park Hill, and then run down to feed the water wheel which drove all the spinning machinery. And that was laid out in about 1780 originally.
A lot happened in Barrowford in the 1930s, didn't it?
A lot of things were demolished in the 1930s, yes, unfortunately. And I'm sure if the people who were alive then had their time again, they probably would look at it in a slightly different way, because there were an awful lot of sort of very important buildings that were lost at that time that I'm sure now will be looked at in a completely different light. But unfortunately,
why do they do it? Normal thing. We must move on. Can't turn the clock back. Progress. Those cottages were built as weavers' loom shops in the 18th century. They were designed to give maximum light and large floor space on the upper floor where the weavers would keep their looms. Barrowford was a hand-loom weaving centre until the 19th century, when power looms such as Hargreaves Spinning Jenny took over. At this time, many textile workers moved to nearby Nelson, where canal and rail links were more suited to manufacturing. Now, a handsome-looking milestone, John, but unusual, embedded into the actual wall lining the river.
That's right. This was built in about 1863, and it was dole work for the unemployed cotton mill workers. Of course, during the 1860s, the American Civil War severely affected the supplies of cotton that were able to be brought in from the United States. And for a time, a lot of the mills closed down, and of course, the mill workers were unemployed. So to alleviate the distress, they were given this dole work to rebuild the wall along the river to help protect the road that we're standing alongside here from the action of the river.
And if you're unemployed, it's still called On the Dole?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Now known as the White Bear, but it was originally Hargreaves House. And during the 1760s, John Wesley, the Methodist preacher, had to shelter here from the mob. He was preaching in nearby Roughlee, and there was a mob organised by the rector of Combe Parish Church to chase him away because, of course, he was taking converts away from the Anglican Church. So they chased him from Roughlee for about a mile over the hill, and he took refuge here with the Hargreaves family, who, of course, were Methodist sympathisers. And the crowd stood outside where we are standing now, almost baying for blood. They'd been well fueled with alcohol before they were sent out, and eventually they had to send troops to take Wesley away with his companions, and one of them was injured during all the jostling that took place outside here.
And where did he go to from here?
Well, he was a sort of itinerant preacher going all around. Really, the north of England was one of his strongholds, and a lot of the people who were involved in the textile industry were quite receptive to his ideas, and they were not so much a part of the established church as you would find in other areas. Being sort of entrepreneurial, they seemed to find Methodism quite attractive.
I can see a very interesting little house here on the corner.
That's the old Barrowford toll house, which was built when this road was created as a turnpike road in 1804. And you can see on the front above the door is a table of the tolls that you had to pay to pass along. There was originally a gate across the road, and we have some photographs showing the gate in position. But every time you went through 6 gates, you had to pay a toll. So the charges are listed on the board there.
No longer, though?
No longer, though. Not since about 1870, when the Turnpike Trust was abolished.